over 50 years now, boys and girls and mums and dads have read and reread Kenneth Grahame's magical story of Mr. Toad and his friends Ratty, Mole and Badger. 4 animals who were sometimes so stupid and sometimes so wise that they were just like human beings. For those who've not yet had the pleasure of their company, and for the thousands who'd like to meet them again, this is the story of The Wind in the Willows. It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The hot sun seemed to be pulling everything green and bushy and spiky up out of the earth towards him, as if by strings. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season. Painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, hunting for missing boat hooks. They were finishing breakfast in their little parlour when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Oh, bother," said the rat. "See it is, Mole, like a good chap, since you've finished breakfast." The mole went to attend the summons, and the rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. And no wonder, for there, standing in the parlour door, was Mr. Badger. This was a wonderful thing indeed, that the badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody. He generally had to be caught, if you wanted him badly, as he slipped quietly along a hedgerow of an early morning or a late evening, or else hunted up in his own house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. The rat was so amazed to see this most welcome but unexpected visitor that he spilt egg all over the tablecloth and sat open-mouthed. The badger took up a position by the fire. "The hour has come," he said at last, with great solemnity. Oh, what hour?" asked the rat uneasily, glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "Toad's hour, the hour of Toad. I said I'd take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." "Toad's hour, of course," cried the mole delightedly. "Hooray, hooray, I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible toad." "This very morning," continued the badger, taking an armchair, "as I learnt last night from a trustworthy source, another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall. At this very moment, perhaps, Toad is busy arraying himself in those singularly hideous garments so dear to him, which transform him from a comparatively good-looking toad into an object which throws any decent-minded animal that comes across it into a violent fit. We must be up and doing ere 'tis too late. You 2 animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall." "Right you are!" cried the rat, jumping up. "We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we're done with him." They set off up the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. Animals, when in company, walk in a proper and sensible manner in single file, instead of sprawling all across the road, and being of no use or support to each other in case of sudden trouble or danger. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall to find, as the badger had anticipated, a shiny new motor car, painted a bright red, standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiters, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps. "Hello! Come on, you fellows!" he cried cheerfully. "You're just in time to come with me for a jolly... Oh, dear. His hearty accents faltered and came to a sad end as he noticed the stern, unbending looks on the faces of his silent friends. "I'm afraid you won't be wanted today," said Badger, calling out to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car. "Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He'll not require the car. And as for you, Toad, we're taking you inside." And Mr. Toad, struggling and protesting, was carried back inside Toad Hall. "Now then," said the badger to Toad as all 4 of them stood together in the hall, First of all, take those ridiculous things off. Shan't, replied the Toad with great spirit. What is the meaning of this gross outrage? I demand an instant explanation. In that case, said the Badger to his two companions, take them off for him. They had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could properly get to work. Then the Rat sat on him, and the Mole got his motoring clothes off him bit by bit. And as they did it, his blustering spirit slowly evaporated. At last, stripped of his driving togs, he sat alone on the floor, forlorn and deflated. And the Badger addressed him. You knew that it must come to this sooner or later, Toad, he said. You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering the money your father left you, and you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving and your smashes and rows with the police. Independence is all very well, but we animals never allow our friends to make fools of themselves beyond a certain limit. And that limit you've reached. You will come with me into the smoking room, and there you'll hear some facts about yourself. And we'll see if you come out of that room the same Toad that you went in. Through the door, the Mole and the Rat, now sitting comfortably in armchairs, could hear the long, continuous drone of the Badger's voice, rising and falling in waves of oratory. That's no good, said the Rat contemptuously. Talking to Toad'll never cure him. He'll say anything. And then they noticed that the long sermon from the smoking room was being punctuated, at intervals, by long, drawn-out sobs, evidently proceeding from the bosom of Toad, who was a soft-hearted and affectionate fellow, very easily converted, for the time being, to any point of view. After some 3/4 of an hour, the door opened, and the Badger reappeared, solemnly holding by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by the Badger's moving discourse. My friends, said the Badger, I'm pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He's truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past, and he has undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I have his solemn promise to that effect. That's very good news, said the Mole gravely. Very good news indeed, observed the Rat dubiously. If only... He was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkle in that animal's sorrowful eye. There's only one more thing to be done, continued the Badger. Toad, I want you to solemnly repeat all those promises you made before your friends here. There was a long pause, and then suddenly but stoutly the Toad said, No, I'm not sorry, and it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious. I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear Badger, so moving, so convincing. But I realize now that I'm not a bit sorry or repentant, and it's no good saying I am, is it? And furthermore, I promise faithfully that the first motor car I see, I shall jump in and drive away. Upstairs with him at once, roared the Badger. So Mole and Rat again made for the Toad, and picking him up bodily as he fumed and protested, they hauled him up the ornate staircase of Toad Hall. It was no easy job. All the way he struggled, while the Badger from the bottom of the stairs called out, I hoped it wouldn't come to this, Toad, but you've so often asked the three of us to come and stay with you here at Toad Hall, and now we're going to. Take him to his bedroom, you two, and lock the door. It was several days later. The Mole was dozing in the sunshine in the gardens of Toad Hall. The three animals had worked out a system whereby one of them would at all times be on guard outside Toad's room until he'd worked the poison out of his system. Rat was on his way up the stairs to take over the watch from Badger, who was itching to stretch his legs, and was to take Mole for a long ramble through his woods. As for Toad, He lay in bed, pale and seemingly without spirit. In fact, so ill did he look that the rat was a little worried. "Dear, kind rat," said the toad feebly from the bed, "might I ask you a favour?" "Well, what is it, Toad?" asked Rat. "Well, I hate to be an additional burden," said Toad, "but I think you'd better run along and fetch the doctor to me. And while you're about it, ask the lawyer to come, and quickly, please, dear Ratty, as I fear the end is not far off." "Now, come on, Toady," said the rat. "Whatever it is that ails you, I'm sure it's not all that bad. You're just a trifle off colour." And then the rat thought to himself, "Well, I've known Toad to be ill before, but never asked for a lawyer. Perhaps I'd better go in case. No doubt the doctor will tell him all is well, but I'd better be on the safe side." A few minutes later, the rat was walking down the driveway on his errand of mercy. He'd locked the door carefully and expected to be back in a very short time. But what he didn't realize was that as he walked, a small laughing figure was watching him from above. It was the toad. As soon as he'd heard the key turn in the lock, he'd leapt out of bed, dressed as quickly as possible in his smartest suit, and filled his pockets with cash. By the time Rat was out of sight, a line of knotted sheets hanging from Toad's window told what had happened. And Toad himself was marching off, light-heartedly whistling a merry tune, in the very opposite direction to Rat. In episode 10, the Toad once again hears the turn of a key in a lock. But this time his jailers are far less sympathetic.